Have you ever just stopped and wondered why our lives are the way they are? It's a massive question, right? Well, today we're exploring the science that's actually designed to answer it, sociology. We're going to break down what it is, how it gives you a powerful new lens to see the world, and, where this whole way of thinking even came from. Let's get into it.
So here's our game plan. First up, we'll nail down what sociology actually is. Then, we're going to talk about its secret weapon, something called the sociological imagination. After that, we'll look at how societies are built, piece by piece. Then we'll take a trip back in time to see where this all started. And finally, we'll figure out where sociology fits in with all the other sciences. You know that feeling? You're struggling with something, maybe it's student debt or trying to find a decent job, and you think to yourself, is it just me? Well, the exact moment you start to wonder if your personal problem is actually part of a much bigger pattern, you're already starting to think like a sociologist.
Okay, let's start at square one. What in the world is sociology? We're about to define the science of society. And as we do, we're going to have to tackle a huge debate that sits right at its heart. At its core, sociology is the scientific study of us, how we act in groups, the relationships we build, and this whole complicated thing we call social life. Early thinkers like Max Weber described it as the science of social action, while others zeroed in on our interrelationships. But really, it all boils down to one thing: trying to systematically understand the hidden patterns in how we all live together. And this leads us to the big question: can you really study something as messy as society scientifically? Well, on one hand, yeah, for sure. Sociologists use the scientific method. They gather data, they test ideas, they look for cause and effect. But the other side of the argument is that their subject isn't just chemicals in a beaker. It's people. And people are unpredictable, we have feelings, and it's basically impossible for a researcher to be 100% objective. And that's exactly why we call it a social science. It takes all the rigor of science and applies it to the fascinating, chaotic world of human society.
All right, so if sociology is a social science, what's its most important tool? This next concept, I honestly think of it as a sociologist's superpower. It's called the sociological imagination. And once you get this, you will never, ever see the world the same way again. We have the American sociologist C. Wright Mills to thank for this one. He introduced this game-changing idea in his famous 1959 book. And trust me, this single concept completely changed how we understand the connection between our own individual lives and the big, wide world around us. So what is it? Simply put, it's a mental tool for connecting your personal life to the wider society. It's the ability to see the link between your own individual story, what Mills called your biography, and all the massive historical and social forces that are shaping it. It's that click, that moment you go from thinking this is just what's happening to me to realizing, whoa, my life is part of a huge interconnected story. And here's the key takeaway. If one person can't find a job, we tend to see that as a personal trouble. But when millions of people across the country can't find a job, it's not just a bunch of personal problems anymore. It's a public issue, and it's probably caused by huge economic and social forces. The sociological imagination is the lens that lets us see that bigger picture. Think about an iceberg. What we see above the water are our day-to-day lives, our personal choices and troubles. But the sociological imagination shows us what's lurking beneath the surface. The enormous unseen structures like the economy, the political system, cultural beliefs, all the stuff that's powerfully steering our lives, whether we realize it or not. Okay, so we've got our superpower lens. Now let's use it to look at what sociologists are actually studying, the fundamental building blocks that make up our social world, all the way from small groups to massive systems. So first, we got to get two key terms straight: society and community. A community is usually defined by that we feeling, shared values, close relationships, like in a small town or a tight-knit neighborhood. A society, on the other hand, is the much bigger, more complex web that holds all those different communities. It's full of similarities and differences. So you might live in a certain community, but we all exist inside a larger society. And society itself has layers. It all starts with simple associations. Think of a student book club, where people just get together for a common purpose. When that group gets a little more formal, with rules and official roles, it becomes an organization, like a university. And when those ways of doing things become so big and established that they shape everyone's lives, they become institutions, like the entire education system itself. So where did this whole way of thinking even come from? It didn't just appear out of nowhere. To really get it, we need to jump back a few hundred years to a time of incredible change and totally radical new ideas. This was basically the perfect storm that created sociology. It started in the late 1600s with the Enlightenment, which was all about using reason. Then bam, you get massive political revolutions in England and France, plus the Industrial Revolution, which completely shattered the old way of life. Suddenly, everything was chaotic and new, and people desperately needed a new way to understand the world they were building.
The biggest change was a huge shift in thinking. For centuries, if you asked why is society like this, the answer was basically because it's always been this way or because God said so. But the thinkers of the Enlightenment started to push back, saying, wait a minute, we should use human reason to build a better, more logical society. And that meant questioning everything, especially the absolute power of kings and the church.
This intellectual revolution was powered by some incredible minds. You had guys like John Locke arguing for separating church and state. You had Jean-Jacques Rousseau writing about a social contract between people and their government. And you even had the physicist Isaac Newton. His discovery of natural laws, like gravity, made people wonder, could there be natural laws that govern human society too? All right, for our last piece of the puzzle, let's zoom out. To really get what makes sociology special, we need to see how it stands apart from and fits in with the other social sciences. Let's take a big social problem, like poverty. A psychologist might look at an individual's mindset or mental health. An economist would analyze it in terms of markets and financial incentives, but a sociologist looks at it as a social construction. That's a fancy way of saying they see it as a problem created and shaped not just by individuals, but by the very rules, norms, and structure of our society itself. And that's why sociology is often called the mother of all social sciences. Think about it. It studies the social soil and the deep roots from which all the other branches of human life, like our psychology or our economy, grow. It provides the essential context for everything else. Which brings us right back to you. We're going to end by turning this powerful lens on your own world. Take a second and think, what is one personal trouble in your life that now, with your new sociological imagination, you can see is actually connected to a much bigger public issue? That ability to ask and start to answer that very question, that's the real power of sociology.